Ever wonder what is the gold standard, who created it, and why we're no longer using it? Well, get ready to find out. The gold standard was a monetary system that tied a country's currency to a specific amount of gold. Under the gold standard, the value of a country's currency was directly linked to the amount of gold held by the central bank. The creation of the gold standard can be traced back to the 19th century, when many countries began to adopt it as a way to promote economic stability and facilitate international trade. The origins of the gold standard can be traced back to the early 19th century, when many countries were experiencing economic instability and currency fluctuations. In response, many countries began to adopt a gold standard, which helped to stabilize their currencies and promote economic growth. The first country to officially adopt the gold standard was Britain in 1821, and many other countries soon followed suit. Under the gold standard, the value of a country's currency was tied to a specific amount of gold. For example, in the United States, $1 was equal to 1/20th.67 of an ounce of gold. This meant that the value of the dollar was directly linked to the price of gold, which was determined by the global supply and demand for the metal. Isaac Newton was one of the most famous scientists in history. He is also known for his role in the development of the gold standard in England during his time as the master of the mint from 1699 to 1727. At the time, England's monetary system was unstable, with different coins made from different metals and varying denominations. Counterfeit coins were also rampant, which led to a lack of confidence in the currency and widespread economic disruption. As the master of the mint, Newton was responsible for overseeing the production of coins and regulating the currency. He introduced several reforms, including a new gold standard that fixed the value of the pound sterling to gold at a rate of £3, 17 shillings, and 10.5 pence per troy ounce of gold. Under the new system, the value of the pound was stable and consistent, and the government could no longer devalue the currency by reducing the amount of precious metal in its coins. Newton's reforms also included new coin designs and anti-counterfeiting measures that improved the quality and authenticity of England's currency. Newton's contributions to the development of the gold standard were significant and helped to establish a stable and reliable monetary system in England. His legacy continues to be felt today, as the gold standard remains an important concept in monetary economics and finance. The gold standard was widely used throughout the 19th and early 20th century, and it helped to promote economic stability and growth. However, the system was not without its problems. One of the main issues with the gold standard was that it limited a country's ability to respond to economic downturns. Because the value of a country's currency was directly tied to the price of gold, there was little room for flexibility in the monetary system. This meant that the countries could not easily adjust interest rates or increase the money supply in response to economic shocks. The gold standard came to an end during the Great Depression in the 1930s. As countries around the world experienced economic downturns, many abandoned the gold standard in order to give themselves more flexibility to respond to the crisis. The United States, for example, abandoned the gold standard in 1933 in order to stimulate the economy and increase the money supply. Other countries followed suit, and by the end of the decade, the gold standard had largely been abandoned. The Bretton Woods Treaty was a landmark international agreement signed in July 1944 in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, USA. The treaty established a new global financial system and created institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD, which later became part of the World Bank Group. The Bretton Woods system was based on fixed exchange rates, with the US dollar being the world's reserve currency. Under the system, the value of a US dollar was fixed to gold at a rate of $35 per ounce, and other countries could exchange their US dollars for gold at that time. This meant that the US dollar was effectively backed by gold, and other currencies were pegged to the US dollar. The goal of the Bretton Woods system was to promote economic stability and international cooperation in the aftermath of World War II. The system was designed to prevent the kinds of competitive currency devaluations and trade wars that had contributed to the Great Depression of the 1930s. It also aimed to provide financing for countries that needed to rebuild after the war. The Bretton Woods system worked well for several years, but it began to face challenges in the 1960s. The U.S. government was spending more money on social programs and the Vietnam War, which led to a balance of payments deficit and a decline in the value of the U.S. dollar. Other countries became concerned about the stability of the system and began to exchange their U.S. dollars for gold, which put pressure on the U.S. gold reserves. In 1971, U.S. President Richard Nixon announced that the U.S. would no longer convert U.S. dollars into gold, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system. Prior to his decision, the U.S. dollar was pegged to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce, and foreign countries could redeem their U.S. dollars for gold at that rate. The system was replaced by a floating exchange rate system, in which the value of currencies was determined by market forces rather than fixed exchange rates. In the late 1960s, the United States faced a trade deficit, meaning that it was importing more goods than it was exporting. This led to a large outflow of U.S. dollars from the country, as other countries demanded payment in U.S. dollars for their goods. As the outflow of dollars continued, other countries became concerned that the U.S. would not be able to maintain the value of its currency relative to gold. In response to this concern, President Nixon announced on August 15, 1971, that the United States would no longer convert dollars to gold at a fixed rate. This effectively ended the gold standard and allowed the U.S. government to print more money without the constraint of having to back it up with gold reserves. The decision to end the gold standard was controversial at the time, with some critics arguing that it would lead to inflation and a decline in the value of the U.S. dollar. However, others believed that it was necessary in order to stimulate the U.S. economy and allow for more flexibility in monetary policy. In the years following the end of the gold standard, the U.S. dollar experienced some inflationary pressure, but it also became the world's dominant reserve currency, as other countries continued to hold U.S. dollars as a store of value. At least, that's the case during the making of this video. In conclusion, the gold standard was a monetary system that tied a country's currency to a specific amount of gold. It was widely used throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries as a way to promote economic stability and growth. However, the system was not without its problems, and it was ultimately abandoned during the Great Depression in order to give countries more flexibility to respond to economic downturns. President Nixon's decision to end the gold standard in the United States in 1971 was a significant event in the country's monetary history. It allowed for more flexibility in monetary policy, but also led to inflationary pressure and changes in the international monetary system. And some would say it led to the creation of Bitcoin. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.